Hey guys, in this video we are going to go over solving equations with variables on both sides. So there was a Zoom that happened today, but in case you missed it, we're going to do the guided practice here as well. So first thing on number one is I see that I need to combine like terms first. And on the notes that were taken earlier today, the problems, like we're writing in a different order, it's okay. The concept is still the same. So we're going to combine our like terms here. Okay, so I'm going to leave negative 12 alone equals, and 2v plus 5v is equal to 7v. And then we have plus 2. Okay, here we're going to start doing our inverse operations. So I notice that I have negative 12 here and a positive 2 here. These are like terms, so I'm going to do the opposite because now I'm moving across the equal sign. So the inverse and opposite operations happen. The opposite of adding 2 is subtracting 2. Positive 2 minus 2 cancels. That creates a 0 pair. So then now we have negative 12 minus 2 is negative 14. And then we have 7v left. Our final step is doing the inverse operation of multiplication because 7 times v is represented here. We're moving it across the equal sign, so we need to do the opposite operation. 7 divided by 7 is 1, so those cancel, in other words, or you're left with 1v. And negative 14 divided by 7 is negative 2 is equal to v. And I ran out of room, so I'm just going to write it on this side. Okay, example number 2, we did a brief review of distributive property today. So we are going to distribute negative 3 through our parentheses, remembering that this is technically a negative 8 because the subtraction sign is brought with it as a term. So as we do this, we have negative 12r, negative 3 times a positive 8. A negative 8 is a positive 24, and then that is equal to negative 36. From this step, we have a two-step equation. The opposite of adding 24 is subtracting 24. Okay, 24 minus 24 is a 0 pair, so that is 0. Then we are left with negative 12r, sorry. Negative 36 minus 24 is negative 60. And our last and final step is doing the inverse or opposite operation. Let me see if I turn off the light if it's darker for you. Can you see it? Okay. The opposite multiplication is dividing, so we're going to divide by negative 12. Negative 12 divided by negative 12 is 1. So we are left with r equals, and then negative 60 divided by a negative 12 is a positive 5. Okay, if you have never heard of integer man, he helps you when multiplying and dividing negatives. So we draw two negative signs for an eye, a positive sign for a nose, and a smiley face. Again, this only works for multiplying and dividing integers. Okay, so I have a negative divided by a negative, so I covered up both of his eyes, and I'm left with a positive, so my answer is a positive 5. Okay, so that was enough of review. Right now, we are going to dive into now with variables on both sides of my equation. So I tried to prep you with putting the variables to the right side of the equation when I'm used to having them to the left. Now we're going to have variables on both sides. So let's take a look at number 1. Now, once we get to variables on both sides, there's actually more than one way to solve these problems. I'm going to show you 2 ways for number 1 first, but please note that there is at least 4 ways that you can solve this problem. Okay, so one way that we used today was a student, I had asked them, hey, which term do you want to move? And terms in this case are x, positive 4, negative 8, and negative 3x. So they decided that they wanted to move the negative 3x. Okay, so as we look, I don't have anything to combine. I need to move it across my equal sign, which means I have to use the inverse or opposite operations. So I'm going to add 3x to both sides. Again, I chose 3x earlier today because the student had said so. Okay, a positive 3, negative 3, or negative 3, positive 3 creates a 0 pair. And here we have an invisible 1 in front of this x. 1x plus 3x is 4x. Bring down your plus 4, and that is equal to negative 8. Again, that created a zero pair, so it is gone. So the next step was I now have a two-step equation. So if I only gave you, don't mind my phone, if I only gave you that piece of the equation, you'd be like, Miss Sams, that's easy. It's a two-step equation. This is our goal, to get rid of the confusion at the top. So now we had a two-step equation where you should be able to identify next steps and how to solve. So first we have the opposite of addition or subtraction. Addition is this case, so we are going to subtract 4 on both sides. 4 minus 4, or 4 plus a negative 4, cancels, creates a zero pair, and we are left with 4x. And negative 8 minus 4 gives me negative 12. Our last and final step, because we still don't have x by itself, is going to be dividing by 4 on both sides. 4 divided by 4 cancels. So then we are left with x is equal to negative 3. Again, we can use integer man. Negative and a positive leaves me with a negative left. Okay, I'm going to go over another method or another way that you could have solved problem number 1 to show that there are multiple ways to get the answer. You choose the way or the term that you want to move. Okay, what if we moved the x first? So the opposite of 1x or a positive 1x is subtracting. And again, I always like to write what I'm subtracting or moving underneath the like term so they line up. That creates a zero pair. So we are left with 4 is equal to negative 8 minus 4x. Okay. The term that is left on this side is a regular number or a constant. So we are going to move the constant over as well. So the opposite of a negative 8 is a positive 8. A constant means that there is no variable attached to it. Negative 8, positive 8 cancels. So we are left with 8 plus 4, or 4 plus 8, which is the number 12. And then we are left with negative 4x. Don't forget about this negative sign and the subtraction sign hanging out. And my final step is to undo, inverse, do the opposite of multiplication. So we're going to divide by negative 4. Positive divided by a negative leaves me with a negative number. And 12 divided by 4 is 3. So that is equal to x. Again, does not matter which term that you use first in undoing or doing the inverse operations whenever you're solving variables on both sides. As long as you are doing the correct inverse operation, you will get the same answer either way. Again, this was just 2 ways. There is at least a total of 4 to solve problem number 1. Okay, I'm going to flip my paper over to the back. Again, I was writing on page number 6. We're going to flip over and we're going to write on the back. Okay, the next page, or the next problem, I should say, because we are still on the back of page 6, happens to be 2. Example number 2 is 4x minus 7 is equal to 1 plus 8x. Okay, I like to draw the river around the equal sign. So there are a couple of ways to solve this problem. I'm going to start off by moving my 4x over. Again, I'm just choosing 4x because it's the smaller of the two coefficients, and the opposite of a positive 4 is a negative 4x. Again, if you chose a different term to move first, that is okay. You will get the same answer as me, as long as you did the correct inverse operations. Don't forget about your subtraction sign. Let's bring that down to a negative 7. 1 and 8 minus 4 is a positive 4x. Okay, our next step is doing the opposite of this positive 1. I cannot bring the 4x over because this 7 does not have an x on it. So the opposite of a positive 1 is subtracting 1. Negative 7 minus 1 is negative 8. This creates a zero pair, and I'm left with 4x. Our last and final step is doing the opposite of multiplication, which is division on both sides. 4 divided by 4 is 1, so you're left with 1x. And in 8th grade and in Math 1, they're going to drop that coefficient and just call it an x. Positive and a negative, let me draw our integer man off to the side. Leaves me with a negative number, and so negative 2 is my final answer. Okay, now I have number 3, which is r plus 2r, and so you know, I'm throwing in different variables because as we get to, especially in Math 1, with your inverse, or not your inverse operations. We always do inverse operations whenever we solve equations. With your literal equations in Math 1, and if you're in 8th grade watching this, you're going to be in Math 1 where you'll get to literal equations, but they start using different variables other than x, and then also all numbers will be taken away, and you will only have letters in some cases. So I'm starting to get you all seasoned and used to, and just, throwing in some other letters in there. So don't freak out just because you see an R. It's still a variable, and the process is still the same. So in this case, before we do anything, though, I see on one side of this equal sign, we have an R plus 2R. I'm going to go ahead and put those together and call that a 3R. So when I do that, I am leaving everything else on the side of the equal sign alone. Okay, now some students will say that you could move 5, which you can, but you're going to have to do another operation to get the 3R back over. And I say all of that because if you notice, you have a variable R here, and the 4R is over here as well. So I'm going to bring the 4R to the 3R. So I'm going to go in this direction. Okay, the opposite of a positive 4R is a negative 4R. 4 minus 4 is a 0 pair. So 3 minus 4 is negative 1R is equal to 5. We are not done yet because my variable has a negative sign. Variables cannot have a negative sign in their answer. Our last and final step again is dividing, because that is the opposite or inverse of multiplication. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 cancels, so you are left with R is equal to negative 5. And again, I know it's negative 5 because I can even use integer man, and I'm left with a negative sign. Last example for your guided practice is number 4. So number 4, we have negative 16. Again, I'm throwing in the variable v this time to get us away from using x just a little bit. And then we have 6v minus 3 plus 8v. Okay, so the first thing that we got to figure out is there any like terms on the equal signs, on the sides of the equal signs to combine? Okay, the first one, I have a negative 16 and a v. They are not like terms, so I cannot combine these. On this section, though, over here, I do have a 6v and an 8v that I can put together. So I'm just going to circle those so we know that we're going to combine them. Okay, and I'm going to work my way over there. So I'm going to do negative 16 plus v, leaving all of that the same. And 6 plus 8, or 8 plus 6 is 14v. And then I'm going to leave my negative 3. The subtraction sign's got to come down alone. Okay, from here you can do it one of two ways. At this point, you can move any terms that you want to, as long as you are using the inverse operations when you are crossing the equal sign. In the examples today, or in the live Zoom class, we decided to move the negative 3. So if I was to move the negative 3 over, you could also move the v over. Let's move the v over. So let's do the opposite of a positive v. And again, I'm doing that just because it is the smaller coefficient of these two. So the opposite of a positive v is a negative v. Okay, that cancels out in your 0 pair. So we have negative 16. Again, that canceled, equals 14 minus a 1v is 13v minus 3. Now we have the opposite of a negative 3, or subtract 3, which is positive. Okay, down below we have negative 16 plus a positive 3, so we're getting out of debt. So that becomes negative 13. I got $3 in my bank account when I was in debt 16, so I'm getting my way out. Then we have 13v over here. The last and final step is doing the opposite of multiplication, or the inverse of multiplication, which is division. And 13 divided by 13 is 1v left, and a positive divided by a negative, move my notebook, is a negative number. So my sign is negative on my answer, and 13 divided by 13 is 1. So my final answer is negative 1v. Okay, good luck on your solving variables on both sides independent practice. If you are watching this video in the 2020-2021 school year, you'll know that we are virtual learning. So your work for today is going on page 7. Again, if you're not watching this video during this time, then don't worry about the notebook. Hope you enjoyed the guided practice in the examples that we went through. But again, if you are watching while we're virtual learning, your page 6 looks like variables on both sides with all the work that we just did. And your page 7 is where you're going to write down and show work for your practice assignment for today. Good luck.